Live from the JSA Podcast Studio, presenting Data Movers, showcasing the leaders behind the headlines in the telecom and data center infrastructure industry.
Welcome, everyone, to our podcast series, Data Movers. I'm your host, Jamie Scotto-Kataya, CEO and founder of JSA, along with my very fabulous co-host, you know him well, top B2B social media influencer, Mr. Evan Christel. Hey, Ev.
Hey, Jamie. Great to be here. Good to see everyone. Super excited for another Data Movers episode where we sit down with the most influential men and women in today's leading telco and data center world, supporting this crazy new network infrastructure requirement across the globe. Jamie, normally we talk tech, but we're going to have a little bit of money talk today. Are you an investor? Where do you put your money? Is it in Bitcoin? Is it in stocks? Is it under your mattress? What say you?
I am all about NASDAQ. Full disclosure, my husband's CEO of a publicly traded company, so we love investing in tech for sure. But also, it's good to squirrel some away. I never got into the Bitcoin thing. I know that was your move, but I don't know. There is something about having dollars under the bed that makes me feel safe at night.
Well, that's the Italian side of you coming
Yes,
out.
definitely.
But yeah, the Dow finished over 40,000. Who knows what's next? 50,000, a million? I guess to the moon kind of thing. But also our tech industry. There's some just real winners out there. A lot of it AI led, but
Right.
in our space, in data centers and cloud, just a tremendous investment cycle, tremendous need. You can't buy data center capacity fast enough, and there's so many deals going down.
That's right. NVIDIA surging. That's a stock that won't quit. But in general, I think especially with AI, generative AI coming mainstream, that is it's a game changer. It's transformational, and there's no denying it. And how we all include that in our lives, in our work, that is that's going to be some transformative stuff, and I would put my money to that. Yeah. Well, talking money, shall we bring on our next guest?
Yes, a real industry insider and a player in private investment banking. So I am very curious about the perspective of our guest here.
Yeah, I mean, we can't talk money without talking our very dear friend, Rich Lukaj. He is the senior managing director of Bank Street. Many of you guys, of course, especially in our industry, know Bank Street. It's a common name, a private investment banking firm primarily serving growth companies in our sector, the communications, media, technology world. And we should say, comprehensive array of services, M&A advisory, debt and equity financing, restructuring advisory. Rich, you do it all. I mean, come on. Welcome.
I do not do it all. I'm supported by an amazing team, thankfully.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about what you do and a little bit about your bio and background, if you would, before we dive in. Maybe how did you get started in a career in investment banking and your specialty, our specialty, media, comms, technology industries? What led you to found Bank Street?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. And first of all, thank you for having me. I have known you all for many, many years, and JSA has been a foundational player communicating and integrating what's happening across the technology and media and telecom space for many, many years. And we're delighted to have crossed paths with you all in many, many capacities over time. As far as my trajectory, I was always a bit of a math, science, and engineering. I'll call myself a geek or nerd of my era. And I always wanted to understand sort of what's next, what were the barriers to the next leap forward in technology and insurgencies across the way that things were done. It's always a marvel to my children when I explain to them that I started my career in a time when there was no email, there was no Excel, there was no PowerPoint. There was no. I can go on and on and on. Cell phones were gigantic sized bricks that were heavy and hard to carry around. But I think those are days gone by, and it's a phenomenal thing to note sometimes, even in our short lifetimes, that so much has changed and so much evolution has occurred, and in large part due to the innovators and founders and folks that push the technology envelope in many cases, throughout our generation, and also the folks that moved capital to afford the opportunity for those folks to challenge the status quo and the shifting dynamics across the arena has been extraordinary by any measure, and candidly accelerating by I guess from the perspective of anyone who's watching the evolution of things. And this pace is not just changing the technology sphere, but is actually changing the way people live, the way people think about their life trajectory, and whether you're a young person thinking about your career trajectory and the fact that many things that you do today will be expiring in a shorter period of time, and the pace of innovation perhaps suggesting that learning is now perpetual. It's a constant evolution. We're constantly trying to catch the next thing. And I remember, when I started my career in investment banking, most of the senior bankers didn't have a computer. Today, we're all trying to keep pace with the latest security application and anti-cybersecurity layer and every kind of thing that is constantly in motion every day, on top of course, the infrastructure layer and technologies that are being introduced to bring efficiency and pace of engagement in a way that has never before been foreshadowed in the way that it is today.
And our industry is so active. Obviously, in the M&A space, there's been some notable recent transactions, many that Bank Street has been leading. Can you share some highlights?
Certainly, it's been a very active start to the new year, and we particularly note the activity around the data center and fiber communication space. We have noted an enormous amount of activity, in particular in the infrastructure side of data centers, that is intending to provide the capacities for both traditional data center use cases and workloads, but also anticipating a barrage of demand from the AI and related technologies sphere. I'll call it advanced buying or forward buying that's taking place, and lots of capital is being committed to that sphere in a race that has many of the leading technology names, as you were talking about technology earlier, pursuing these infrastructure projects to make sure that they're adequately equipped for the generation of activity that's to come. This has obviously caused a bit of question mark as to how do you fund it all, as the capital pools are so large relative to anything the data center sphere has ever done before. And in fact, it is for the first time probably so large that the demands on resources, whether it's land or power or money, is squeezing out other societal needs. And so there will be some very interesting times here as the confluence of societal goods that come from all of these technology rollouts are also challenging the basic need for sustainable power and other resources in certain geographies, that I think will also lead in some respects to a number of these projects moving to less populated places where they're not competing with society for power and land resources. And you'll also see, by virtue of the scale of the capital requirements here, a wider variety of, I'll call them joint venture type initiatives, where power company providers and investors may be much more closely collaborating with data center infrastructure developers, and in some cases also the customer side of the equation, enabling either through contractual commitments or financial commitments, as the case may be, to make these projects possible in the timeline that will meet expectations for demand. The other aspect is, I'll call it on the large infrastructure project side, is the fiber side. The fiber side is also, in some cases, forcing massive projects with amazing strand count to become justified in order to actually feed and interconnect some of these massive data center farms that are necessitating folks that want to interconnect these ecosystems, and in some cases also, or in many cases also, demanding that enterprise carriers and other ecosystems have the ability to interconnect at these facilities, in effect finding the lowest latency onboarding onto cloud environments as well. So, the fiber side of the equation is also affected by the data center ecosystem, but I think also as society has become, I'll call it broadly speaking, more demanding of bandwidth, whether it's for educational purposes, whether it's for business purposes, remote work purposes, or wide varieties of other applications that people are consuming, essentially have made it an absolute necessary utility for modern life today. And as such, private capital, as well as in some cases public capital, is supporting the rollout of, I'll call it a generational level of infrastructure across fiber. And we're seeing it, we have seen it candidly for the last 30 years, and we have been at the forefront of financing and helping companies grow to scale in the commercial fiber sphere. And in recent years, we've been evangelizing the accelerating rollouts of fiber to consumers, and that's been true on the world stage. We've had room and opportunity to be involved in transactions in Chile and Colombia, working with KKR to create foundational fiber that's going to be used throughout those societies, really, in those countries. And we had the benefit of working with the folks at BTG Pactual in Brazil, and helping them extract the Vital assets from Oi. And it's been a marvel to watch what that platform has been able to do in a relatively short period of time, and the incredible pace at which it continues to grow. We've done similar projects, around the globe, but most notably, the pace of acceleration in the U.S. and I'll call it the North American market more broadly has been most potently and most noticeable in recent years. And I think while some countries have almost 100% fiber in their markets already, the U.S. has actually lagged, interestingly enough, despite our technology leadership in some spheres. And I think the combination of private and public capital is seemingly intent on bridging that gap. And we're seeing a wonderful, call it, collection of large-scale players making wholesale augmentations to their platforms to fiberize essentially their markets. We're seeing all kinds of innovators and entrepreneurs, in some cases, inserting themselves into geographies where customers have been somewhat neglected, and they see a market opportunity to protect, to build and protect a market position in those geographies. And we've been at the forefront and a market share leader in providing both capital and strategic advice to players in that ecosystem. Jamie, you made note of a couple of recent notable announcements. And I think we were very proud of our association with the transaction, working with EQT, who, after selling Segra to Cox, a landmark transaction where we managed to sell one of the largest and densest commercial operations in the Southeast to a player like Cox, who wanted to become a much bigger enterprise player. It left a relatively smaller platform in the consumer side for EQT, and EQT obviously has grown considerably in their infrastructure investing activities and became a big fan of the consumer broadband opportunity, and really wanted to have a much larger play in the US than Lumos represented. We looked at a number of acquisitions and opportunities where we could transform the size of Lumos in that direction. But as we went down that path, T-Mobile, that is, began to strike a variety of, I'll call them wholesale relationships with open network providers, and made it clear that they intend to build a T-Fiber offering of scale to the marketplace, and competing effectively on a parity basis with their friends at AT&T and Verizon around the country. And we approached them with the prospect of thinking about marrying EQT's appetite to be a bigger player in the space with their marketing and depth of consumer attention and mind share to create perhaps a platform that starts with Lumos, but ultimately builds a much bigger market presence for them in the consumer broadband space. So it's a deal we're very proud of. It's the first of its kind. It's the first time T-Mobile also has invested in physical assets on the fiber side, and involved obviously a number of complexities, including the fact that T-Mobile has a parent company in Germany, and this transaction has both cross-border considerations as well as some pretty powerful factors that will be game-changing in some of the geographies where the new T-Fiber JV will play. So we're very excited about that. Another transaction of note in recent weeks has been the transaction combining or represented Unity in reacquiring essentially the Windstream platform under the same umbrella. And that transaction is another one we're very proud of. It's been tried many times by many parties over the years, and we're proud of the fact that we're able to navigate a variety of factors in that transaction as well to reestablish a business that reintegrates both the network and the customer layer under one umbrella, perhaps undoing the original demarcation for separation, I guess almost a decade ago, and thinking about the new business as a really well-positioned and strong platform for its own aggressive pursuits, both of consumer broadband opportunities as well as commercial opportunities. And then obviously they have a managed services and security platform layer as well that transcends all of these networks going forward. That really puts the company in a position to be an aggressive player and perhaps really well positioned to think about themselves as part of larger strategic wins going forward as well. I can go on. We've likewise done a number of transactions in the commercial space. We're in the market with a large number of transactions as well, but it's really been a very constructive backdrop. We see some folks who are perhaps lamenting, the days of zero cost of capital backdrop that we had some time ago, but other folks, I think, are also mindful of the fact that you do what is strategically rational, and the industrial logic should be dictating your long-term strategic endeavors. And we've been proudly associated with many visionary operators and managers, as well as investors that have a longer-term perspective, both historically and forward-looking in that regard.
It's so true,
Wow.
right, Evan? Like, just so you know, like, these are the projects that are making the headlines, and it all, when you distill it all, it always comes back to the Bank Street team. I was actually on an elevator at ITW last week, and one of my friends, potentially a client, turns to me and goes, I'm on my way to go see Rich, which is code for get the M&A press release ready. So it's incredible.
That's so cool.
So
Very exciting. times. Really exciting to see how these projects unfold, and particularly the T-Mobile project. That's going to be a blockbuster over time. I mean, big picture, Rich, I mean, your opinion, what are some of the common themes or catalysts prompting this huge uptick in transactions, deals? What's going on in the marketplace right now?
Well, I'm not sure I'm suggesting that there's been a massive uptick in transactional volume. Some of these transactions, as you might imagine, take years
Right.
to curate and to cultivate and to navigate many, many complexities to ultimately consummate a successful transaction. But I do think that it is fair to say that at a macro level, an enormous amount of apologies for that. That's going to keep going.
That's okay.
Is that an old school phone? It sounds like it's the red phone from the 70s ringing once
It is
or
an
something.
old school phone.
I feel like it's a red phone by his like bedside. That like if that rings,
Buy, sell,
Yeah.
buy. Yeah.
But in any event, look, I think it's fair to say that there's a massive amount of invested capital that is harbored across the sector. Many folks of whom have been invested in some of these companies and have done extraordinarily well. Some folks are going to try to figure out how to time exactly when the perfect window is to monetize certain of these assets. There's also an enormous amount of dry powder across candidly every varietal of fund, whether it's a credit-centric fund, a special structured finance type of vehicle, or private equity, institutional infrastructure type money. Candidly, also true of pension funds and sovereign funds and every other varietal of traditionally LP type folks that are increasingly co-investing along with GPs and also increasingly doing direct deals themselves in the more sizable sphere of transactions. So there's a really good balance of capital availability with I guess grown pent up demand, if you will, of folks that may be seeking liquidity opportunities. So we do foreshadow a bit of an uptick here as we look forward, and for folks that are obviously thinking about where they sit in that spectrum and how they want to think about those kinds of strategic opportunities. We obviously welcome those discussions. My colleagues and I obviously proactively reach out to folks to talk about such things, but also welcome your audience to the degree that we can be helpful to reach out to us to flesh out those kinds of ideas as well.
And I'm sensing from you as you're talking about, resources really driving demand for projects. There's obviously a growing focus on sustainability within all layers of our industry right now. How is the topic of sustainability making its way into recent and future transactions?
It's a very big part of particularly most of the larger scale, I'll call them infrastructure layer type dialogues. And it's hard to imagine a scenario where large power consumptive types of projects don't demand a dialogue about how to do that in a sustainable, responsible, and also available way. And I would say in the near term, folks are probably taking access to all the green energy that anybody can muster, and the demand far exceeds, candidly, much of, or I should say, all of that capacity. So for periods of time, I think we're going to see also a desire to explore nuclear and other kinds of alternatives, or I should say surrogates in the green sphere, because of the desire for scale and flexibility in deployment and other variables that make nuclear a very interesting option in some circles. And we also candidly will see, fossil solutions remaining important for the time being, because the supply-demand imbalance for power in this country is such that all of this cannot be solved in the immediate term with pure renewable solutions. So I think the trajectory is undeniable in terms of the direction where power production and consumption is headed, but between here and there will not be a straight line or a binary switch from one to the other. It's just not feasible to do that in a responsible way, and let alone cost-effective way. I think across other arenas, you see other ESG characteristics also being important. But I would say, all of these are healthy trends for the future of the industry. And as I often remind people, this category of comms infrastructure and services is somewhere between a quarter and a third of every country on Earth, and this ecosystem is not going anywhere. And arguably, as it integrates more applications and solutions and services into the equation, it's only going to grow as a part of the GDP of every nation on Earth.
Well said.
Phenomenal. That's really, really great to see. It wouldn't be a tech chat without talking about AI in some way. Every day we see amazing illustrations of the huge investment in AI and infrastructure, big tech doing tens of billions of dollars in deals and investments and new data centers and acquisitions. What is your point of view from the transaction, the investment banking side on, how AI is going to impact, our industry?
Well, look, I'll even talk about it in the context of our industry. When I started my career in investment banking, you had to go to an actual library in your building to find a folder with the financial statements of the target company that you wanted to analyze for whatever transaction you were looking to use it for. And if that folder was out, you just wait until it comes back before you get to look at it. So when you think about where we've come since then, with I'll call it the pervasiveness of the distribution of data, candidly, it makes possible for a firm like Bank Street to actually exist. And in those days, the access to or the possessing of the data was reason enough to have a franchise value in a category. Today, the information and the data is much more pervasive and available, and candidly, franchises exist and succeed in this marketplace, not because of data, because data is at relative parity for the corporate world today, but because of the folks that have the experience, the finesse, and the transactional depth and fortitude to navigate complex, in many cases, multifaceted transactions that solve real world problems for these businesses. And we're very fortunate that our senior team has in many cases 25 to 35 years of transactional experience with a lot of that being applied in a way that is, I'll call it increasing the probability of success in one end of the spectrum, but also providing for fluidity and confidence in the execution of a transaction as well.
Yeah. Tenacity, creativity, relationship management. You can't find that on ChatGPT, but there's foundational data that is always good. But it is an interesting time for sure. All right, so we are
maybe, Jeannie, on that point, I'd like to just point out that ChatGPT is not the full extent of obviously the AI perspective that we think about. Machine learning to us has, as we look at our future and thinking about the predictability of things and the power of the tools in terms of being able to fuel decision making here going forward is going to be another level of game changer. And I think, Evan, some of what you were alluding to on the power of AI is undeniable. We see that likely to yielding much more efficient execution that will become viable. The documentation layer and processing elements, and rather than relying on human layer to find fairways on certain types of things, they will become much more methodical and therefore more efficient. And maybe eliminate some of the waste or time that is often consumed between parties that are at far away positions when that's not where they can stay and have a deal actually happen. So, we're kind of excited about all of that. We've been prime beneficiaries of those kinds of tools historically, and we think that will inure to the benefit of nimble organizations that are able to adopt and translate those tools into effective execution for their clients.
Yeah, no doubt a competitive edge, for early adopters, and for sure you guys are leading the way there. All right, so now we're getting to a really fun, fast, it's called the rapid fire question section, where we just ask a couple of crazy questions at you, and you can just fire back with the first thing on your mind. So you travel a lot, obviously, for work. What's been the most interesting international trip you've been on?
Oh, there's so many of those, but I would say maybe taking a slightly different perspective on that, I'd say the surprise I had the first time I visited Hong Kong, I would say many moons ago now, but I remember as a New Yorker thinking like there's no other city quite like New York, and I remember being taken back by the dynamism and the energy and the 24-hour life and even on the business front, I always thought New Yorkers were intense and aggressive business people, but I found that ecosystem to be, very familiar and surprisingly deep and capable. And it's I guess, no surprise that that part of the world has continued to grow and be even more dynamic in our lifetime. The other maybe timely one is I remember the first time I visited Israel with Mike Bloomberg. That was not a business trip; it was more a philanthropic endeavor. But I remember thinking like I knew enough because I'm a bit of a history buff, and I thought I had a good sense of that part of the world. But I remember being struck by the tension that seemed to be omnipresent there. And thinking about today's headlines, it is certainly my hope that a peaceful path can be found there, as it's been too long and too hard for all the people that live in that geography.
Well said.
Yeah, let's hope for that. Let's put our tech or geek hats on. When you think about tech, what personally intrigues you, excites you about the future of tech in the next couple, 3, 5 years?
Well, look, I think the key is going to be to keep pace. I mean, I think that the big wave for, I guess I wouldn't limit it to just tech, is the big thing to watch over the course of the next generation, I would call it, is the speed with which I guess change occurs. And I think that is going to be something not so easy to adjust to, whether that's administratively, bureaucratically, politically. We're having a time in our generation, I think, when the impacts of our form of communication, media, social media, and the degree to which it is impacting our society. We can debate whether it's good or bad. I would argue it's both. And I think these dynamics are going to be the challenges of our next generation, but I think also will present the opportunities for the next generation as well. Just as I think there have been many billionaires made introducing social media to the world, there will be probably more billionaires made as they undo the brainwashing and undesirable elements that are affecting young people and our society more broadly. And I think those people will come from technology. Those people will also come from the political spectrum. I was touched by some time I spent with my daughter and some of her classmates in political science at University of Chicago that were debating things that I think many adults should be thinking about. And I have no doubt that they will be drawing our attention to those subjects as time goes on. So I think exciting times are ahead of us. I remain extremely optimistic across the spaces we're involved in. There will certainly be some folks that maybe took some shortcuts. They're going to find that it's very hard to do that in a space that is as talented and competitive as our spaces are. I think there are long-term things that people need to keep their eye on, and whether it's as part of our business or as part of what's happening in these sectors. And we pride ourselves on listening intently. Maybe something we often used to tell our children, listen twice as much as you talk, because there's often a lot to be garnered before you apply your skill to a situation.
Couldn't agree more. All right. So what are you reading? What's the last book that you've read, and would you even recommend it? I feel like you're a guy like me who has shelves and shelves of old school books. No?
I have a whole room dedicated to books, but it probably would reveal my warped mind. But look, I guess one interesting, related to a book situation that developed recently is I ran into an old friend of mine who retired from being the COO of a big company. It was a public company for a while, and he his name is Daryl Ferguson, by the way. He had retired and settled down in the Carolinas, and as you might imagine, active minds are hard to settle. So he got very interested in the geography he was living in, and discovered that there was I'll call it first settlement of the United States that happened before the British arrived, and decided to write a book called The American Conquistador, which is based on his avid research on the topic. And it was a fascinating read about the race to discover this new land, and told in a way that is a fascinating way to learn about it. And I spent some time with him, and it was just fascinating to see somebody from the telecom world involved in something that is particularly poignant to those who are American history lovers, and also probably of very high impact to those that maybe think about American history from a Latin perspective as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to check it out as well. You mentioned younger people, the younger generations, a couple of times in our chat. Any advice to those younger generations about getting into our industry and the digital infrastructure industry or financial services? What advice would you give?
I guess my advice is, despite all the changes and despite all the spooky things I referred to over the course of this discussion, that old habits still apply. Integrity is probably the highest on the list still. It is in rare supply to find people who are honest. And Jamie, you made reference to relationships. From our perspective, relationships aren't about call logs and how many times you're spamming somebody, although we do some of that. But for us, relationships are based on trust, and we take the trust that people put in us very, very seriously. And what we do is very serious work that affects, many cases, thousands of lives. And while sometimes people look at bar charts with our league tables and transaction volumes or whatever awards we win on any given year, but behind all of that are real stories about real people who made real decisions, some really hard ones, and took leadership. And from my perspective, looking back to the old habits of be honest, be truthful, do your best, be transparent, and earn your stripes. Don't promise things you can't do. Don't do things that you shouldn't do. And shortcuts are noticed more than ever. And so it's a competitive world out there. I think the average American is just getting used to it. And the world has become more equalized. All the comments I made earlier about how smaller businesses are competing with larger businesses very effectively today. Smaller markets are also competing with larger markets more effectively for the same reasons. Technology is an equalizer, and it is making the world a different place. And I think the sooner we get smarter about what this new world is, the sooner we start hating each other and arguing about things that don't make any sense, and hopefully start building a better world together.
Well said. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. I mean, Richard, this was an extraordinary tour de force, and it really opened my eyes to the so almost behind the scenes role that finance and investment plays in the infrastructure world. As a techie, it's not something we always think about, but so fundamental to the industry's growth and success. Jamie?
Oh my goodness. You said so much, Rich. I feel like a better person just after this chat. Love that you mentioned integrity. That's a core value of ours here at JSA. So you're talking to my heart. And also you said hope so many times. I counted at least 3 times. One too poignantly when you were talking about visiting your daughter at school. So with that, I feel like this conversation was hopeful. This world is still very hopeful, and there's so much we can do together to make it even better, stronger. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
All right, guys, if you enjoyed this Data Movers podcast as much as I did, please be sure to check it out on jsa.net/podcast for this episode as well as upcoming. And always, of course, check us out, right? Right, Evan?
Yeah, we're still on Twitter. We're hanging on, Jay Scotto and Evan Kirstel, and all the platforms, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, we're all there. So give us a follow and let's connect.
And as always, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in, and happy networking.